Congress now has the implementation legislation ready to go in the House for the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. A brief review of its 239 pages suggests that there are at least 5 items that the media won't cover. We'll cover those and offer suggestions on how you can help in this episode of Analysis Behind the News, where we provide the perspective that you can use to help save American liberty and independence. First of all, we've updated the USMCA Issues Index so that you can tap directly into it to know where the globalist traps that are in that agreement. So we have a link to it in the video description. Now, getting back to the implementation legislation, which approves the USMCA and also changes American law to fit the USMCA provisions. And again, there's at least 5 items that you probably won't hear from the mass media. And I'm not going to go through and read each one of these pages in here for you. However, let me please paraphrase some of these for you. So, number 1, the 239-page implementation bill is written to help make federal, state, and personal sovereignty subservient to the USMCA. Now, you can look this up in section 102, titled Relationship of the USMCA to United States and State Law, which reads that no provision of the USMCA shall have any effect if it is in conflict with the law of the U.S. Now, this sounds great until you realize that Congress will just change the laws if there is indeed a conflict. Okay? So, going on, it then states that the Implementation Act won't be used to amend or modify U.S. law or limit authority of any law of the U.S. Unless specifically provided for in the Act. So, which is it then? One or the other. It then goes on to state that in the event of a legal challenge, that no state law may be declared invalid if it is inconsistent with the USMCA, except in an action brought by the United States for the purpose of declaring such law invalid. You're beginning to see this. It then goes on to state that there can be no private challenges to the USMCA. So where does that leave individuals and companies that are forced to participate via USMCA? Will the federal government speak on their behalf? Well, good luck with that. Number 2, the implementation bill does nothing to protect American sovereignty from the creation of an unaccountable regional bureaucracy that will operate on the level above the federal government. Now, if you were to crack open the USMCA, you would see that Chapter 30 establishes the Free Trade Commission that will supervise all committees, working groups, and other bodies created under the USMCA, including adding an unlimited number of committees or ad hoc groups, the ability to make changes to the agreement, and they can also issue binding interpretations for tribunals and panels that are created under the USMCA. So, at first glance, the creation of this commission seems rather innocuous, until you realize that at some point, the creation will outstrip its creator and be in the position to dictate legislation under the auspices of its committees and working groups. Much like we have seen with the members of the European Union. The European Commission not only proposes legislation, but is responsible for implementing what the European Parliament passes. Then, member countries are just expected to rubber stamp the legislation within their own country's government. Since global precedence has been set, this is what we can look to for the Free Trade Commission to do of what will become the North American Union. Number 3, the implementation bill does nothing to protect American sovereignty from language in the USMCA that binds the U.S. to provisions of United Nations treaties that have not been ratified through the U.S. Senate. Chapter 1 of the USMCA mentions the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, as does Chapter 24 under Sustainable Fisheries Management. Since the Senate is constitutionally bound to ratify treaties, this is one of the globalist ways to get around national sovereignty. And yet, Congress fails to recognize this, or perhaps is complicit in it. Number 4, $1.5 billion are being created through a general capital increase of the North American Development Bank. This bank was created under the original NAFTA and exists to help fund and develop environmentally and financially sustainable projects on both sides of the southern border. The bank is given money from both the U.S. and Mexican federal governments. The $1.5 billion will be used to initially carry out USMCA enforcement through various federal agencies of the U.S., including, but not limited to, the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Commerce, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Department of Labor. Regarding costs to American taxpayers, the implementation bill authorizes the U.S. to buy an additional 150,000 shares of the bank, but no price is mentioned in the agreement or the legislation. However, the bank's 2016 annual report indicates that certain shares are valued at $10,000 each. So if we follow that math, then we can make the conclusion that the $1.5 billion is the initial cost to American taxpayers alone. And lastly, number 5, the implementation bill does nothing to quell language in the USMCA that looks like a backdoor to open immigration. Chapter 15 of the USMCA, titled Cross-Border Trade in Services, states in part that either country cannot impose the limitation on the total number of natural persons that may be employed in a particular service sector. Now, you can find that on page 4 of Chapter 15. Now, overall, the USMCA builds upon what NAFTA started back in 1994, a creative step towards a new world order. And, that's not from us. That's a quote from former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. Now, he also wrote in the Washington Post prior to NAFTA being passed that NAFTA is not a conventional trade agreement, but the architecture of a new international system. Even elite businessman and globalist David Rockefeller called NAFTA an opportunity to build a true new world in the Western Hemisphere. Now, for these reasons and for many more, the USMCA must be defeated. Please call, tweet, and email messages to Congress. The House is expected to vote on the USMCA Thursday, December 19th, while the Senate Majority Leader has publicly stated that he will wait until after the impeachment trial. But even that can change in a moment's notice. We need you to flood Capitol Hill and your congressman's home district offices with phone calls, tweets, and emails. Now, congressmen have told us in the past that if they get 50 calls on a particular issue, it grabs their attention. With your help, we can certainly do that in every congressional district. Please call repeatedly their home district offices in your state as well as their DC offices. Again, they respond best to calls and tweets. Then get others to do so as well. Resources to help you are included in this video's description, including a link to the USMCA Issues Index and a legislative alert that you can use to contact Congress. Please protect American sovereignty by stopping the USMCA, and don't forget to share this far and wide. And until next time, we'll see you then.